Thank you so much, Ellen. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today for this panel to look backstage at our favorite big live events. I'm Rachel Pfennig Hales. I'm the Experience Manager at Rock Lititz. If you're not familiar, Rock Lititz is a unique production campus that focuses on the rehearsal and building of the production elements that go backstage. So we have vendors from all different kind of areas and specialties, and they come here to Rock Lititz to help bring the pieces together, rehearse it, and really to expand our knowledge as the backstage crew. I was able to start my career on tour, working in the production industry, and really fell in love with the way that these shows come together. I am the author of Tour Book, which is a nonfiction book that looks at different road staff from around the industry, and really love getting to know people's stories and what brings them to this space. Throughout your time through All Access, you're going to hear about a lot of different pieces of the music business. This panel here is about focusing on the way the productions come together and how different teams make the vision, the napkin sketch for that event, and turn that into a reality. I'm really, really excited for today because we have an all-star panel. And I know I'm going to walk away learning a lot and kind of understanding some new perspectives on how this piece is together. So I want to thank everybody for their time and for joining us. And without further ado, I want to introduce this amazing group of really experienced professionals that figure out a way to be able to, again, create that vision and put it together backstage to create these large-scale events. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, and we'll dive in a little bit to how these different departments and focus points come together. So Bing, I'm going to start with you as a senior producer at an agency called Production Glue. Really wonderful work there. Bing, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do within this industry.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everyone. My name is Askia Bing. Everyone calls me Bing. I have been in the kind of event industry probably going on 16, 17 plus years. I'm a senior producer at Production Glue, which is a TAIT company, which essentially means that I am a conduit between client conversations and internal teams. So from the RFP process all the way to execution, all the way to load in, load out, I am kind of an integral part of making sure the client is getting what they want and require and what their needs are to be met, as well as making sure that the internal team, production managers, coordinators, creative, so on and so forth, are kind of led on the right path to be successful.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Bing. Sooner, why don't you jump in next?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. My name is Sooner Routhier, and I am a designer producer, mainly for concerts, concert touring, but I do a lot of special events as well, TV. So basically means that I'm the pain in the ass artist that comes up and talks to the artists to say, hey, what do you want to do on your stage? And then I draw it up with a team of people and try to create it and then deal with the production team to make it come to life. That is the short explanation of what I do. My role can go anywhere from just lighting design to full-on production design and bringing in choreography and costume and everything to create an entire show, like a show scripting and everything. So it kind of runs the gambit between all the creative roles.
It is cool to see kind of what your name will pop up on, but Sooner is definitely a wonderful creative and helps to keep these shows on track and kind of true to their artistic center. So we'll hear a lot more about that. Finally, I'd like to introduce 5-1, David Norman, who has also done a lot of different roles, worked as a production manager, a tour accountant, and several other backstage elements. David, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm David Norman, and as Rachel said, most of my friends call me 5-1, and it's a long story of how I got that nickname. But I've been touring for about 40 years, as you can see by all the gray. But as Rachel said, I've worked as tour manager, production manager, tour director, tour accountant, which I prefer to do tour accounting because I've always been a nerd at heart and I love numbers. But I am also the president of an organization called Well Done, where we help college and high school students find internships and mentorships. And if it's an unpaid internship, we can hopefully provide a small stipend to kind of offset the cost of that. I'm also on the board of an organization called the Touring Career Workshop, which is based out of Nashville. And I have a touring company called Tour Forensics, where we do remote advance work, remote settlements, accounting, budgets, and all that stuff. And I've known Rachel for a few years, so I'm glad to see her. And I've worked with Sooner before, and hopefully get to work with Bing.
I do. It's a small enough industry, and it's important to be able to know and kind of cultivate and build these relationships across departments, right? Even though Sooner might focus on design, she needs to know the producers and the production managers. She needs to know these different people in order to make that show work. So in the context of today, especially within the kind of frame of all access, you're going to hear about a lot of parts of the music business industry, right? For the purpose of this panel, we're really focusing on that physical show, how that event or that concert or that whatever it is pieces together from kind of conception through the manufacturing stage, figuring out how to pack it into a truck and physically get it into its location, right? And so while we all approach it from different specialties, different backgrounds, different kind of starting points even, we all have that same end goal in mind. We really want to create an amazing and usually really immersive experience for our audiences, regardless of what that event is. But the steps towards getting there and creating that experience is going to look different for all of us. So a big thing we talk about backstage, and especially at Rock Lititz, is understanding the importance of the collaboration between these types of people and these types of roles building towards that final show, right? So kind of looking at our different areas here, what types of responsibilities fall to each of you as you start to piece a show together, as you first get kind of brought in, knowing our end goals are really similar and kind of the same? Bing, I'm going to toss to you to start again.
Sure. Well, what's interesting for me is that my beginning started in the music industry. So I love the fact that this has kind of come full circle, and I get a chance to meet and hopefully work with David and Sooner. But I think the premise is always kind of the who, what, where, when, and why. Like, what are we doing? Where is it happening? How do we want it to look? I don't know where budget fits in, but it always does fit in, like, because there's always a cost. And kind of like, how is this all going to become get pulled together? And part of that from my side, in terms of working at an agency like Production Glue, which is very show management and show heavy, in just a slightly different way than what David and Sooner do, is finding out what the client wants, what they want the end result to look like, and then kind of pulling the team together from a coordination standpoint to say, all right, who do we need from staff? Do we need stage managers? Do we need show callers? Do we need deck SMs or A1s, V1s, like all of the kind of moving pieces that actually go into putting on a show? And then obviously from a creative standpoint, working with someone like Sooner would be like, what's the vision? If you ask me to do it, I have no vision. I'm not the vision at all. But to have that collaboration and have that conversation with someone from a creative standpoint, as well as someone who like David and his experience, would be to be like, okay, where do we want to go and how do we want this thing to look once we kind of get it started?
So a lot of nuts and bolts, a lot of timeline and budget, sort of understanding the realities of getting people to where they're going is what it sounds like in that space. When you talk about clients reaching out to you, what types of clients are coming to you typically looking for services?
Well, primarily for me, since I've been at Production Glue, my main client is Nike. So all of the Nike kind of internal and PR and communications events are under my belt, and then any of the larger kind of consumer-facing ones, which are usually like Brand Jordan events, All-Star Weekend events, anything that is going to be connected to Nike, from the VPs all the way to the CEO, down to consumer-level events. So the width and breadth of what that is for Nike kind of falls under my belt. And then sometimes I have one-off events from Instagram to Snap, which is another one that we're working on now. So it definitely spans the gamut in terms of like the scale of what we do.
I appreciate that, because while this conversation might keep circling back to concerts, and that is going to be somewhere of our kind of common ground lies, it's an important conversation to understand how important these types of skill sets and the need for these types of roles are beyond just concerts, right? And Nike's a great example. Any of these brands are looking for experiential opportunities now that take somebody to understand the details, to coordinate the pieces, the teams, make sure the communication is there, and make sure those nuts and bolts are happening. So Bing, I really appreciate that. So as an event kind of gets started, you need to understand the parameters that we're working with, right? The reality checks. But we also need to make sure we're chasing that same similar vision. So Sooner, do you mind if you kind of pick that up and talk about what happens when you collect a project? As coming from I know it can be anywhere from design to full, lighting design to full show design, but as you pick up a project, where do you get started? How do you kick things off?
Yeah, I mean, it's always helpful to talk directly to an artist or an executive producer to get their vision directly from the source. Otherwise, I end up playing the telephone operator game, right? I find this happens a lot with sometimes younger managers where they really want to keep their clients super close, and then suddenly they're explaining an idea that the artist wants, and then it comes to me, and it's like a little jumbled because maybe some words aren't like exactly what the artist had said, but they are very important to know. And so essentially I end up talking directly to the artist or a creative director. If a creative director is the person who is in charge of the creative, that happens a lot as well. Once I get their thoughts down, it's time to put pen to paper or fingers on keyboards and mouse clicks to create the show. I tend to like to work within the production budget parameters and logistics. Like for me, that is really important because my favorite phrase is that we're in the music business, not the music fun times. So it's really important for artists to walk away with money. Like this is how they make their money. So usually once I get the creative figured out, like from the artist or what their ideas are, then I have to talk in reality to people like David, like 5-1, about production budgets and logistics. How are you carting this stuff around the country or around the globe? Like, does it have to go into shipping containers and all that jazz, right? How many crew you're planning on taking? Because if I build something that requires 20,000 crew people, then obviously you only have 5. We're not going to make it happen. So, once I get through the logistics and sort of get the creative, it's kind of an interesting marrying of those two things to make something happen.
Having gotten to talk to you over the years and kind of understand your approach, I always think it's interesting. I imagine a lot of people expect your answer to be very artistic, very rooted in this vision and this creative answer, which you are super creative, and the shows you create are so beautiful. But I find it interesting. Your answer usually is rooted in hard details, right? What are the parameters? What are the hard things you need to keep in mind? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I was a roadie for 15, 16 years. Like I was actually the person on the bus that would get up in the morning and load in the gear, plug in all of my cables, make it work. And I was the one that was behind the console running lights. I mean, I did that for a long, long time. And I started in clubs where I was the only person on the lighting crew, right? Like, and then I ended in stadiums where I had 16 lighting people underneath me. And I was really sad because I didn't know all their names because I didn't see them all the time. It was the worst. That's when I stopped. It was like, okay, the personality part, like that went away. I'm done touring. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just about like, I just learned that way. I know what it takes to get things in and out of a building because I had to go through it. And I mean, it's obviously changed drastically now, but I like my friends that are on the road that are making sure that this baby that they're taking care of is taken care of properly, and no one's, upset that they have to basically work through doors to get a show together. I would rather it be functional and look amazing. And there's definitely ways to do it, as long as you collaborate with the people that know those things better than you do, right? I lean on production managers and technical directors and vendor rep all the time. That's who I lean on all the time to make these things happen.
Do you mind sharing a few of your most recent clients?
It's always so embarrassing.
Everyone's attention. They need to hear things like Nike and Coldplay.
Yeah, I know. I have the pleasure of working with Coldplay currently. I'm their lighting designer. Muse, I'm co-production designer of Muse. Evanescence, which 5-1 and I worked on together. Creative directed a rodeo this spring. I don't know if that appeals to anybody. It's super exciting for me. There's just a few there.
No, I think that's great because it is a good versatile group. And it sounds like you're at the point right now where you're taking on maybe a few different shows and things at a time. Whereas opposed to when you're actually on the road with something, you're a little more focused on what's physically right there. And that is what a lot of this world or this backstage piece is. I've heard it said from a lot of people, right? But success for a lot of these roles backstage is when someone can come and look up at that stage and not think about anyone who's behind that stage, right? You walk in to see Elvis and you only think about Elvis up on that stage, right? But
that's
our job, yeah, right.
By design, we have to be the magic behind the scenes so the audience just sees the show happen.
It's supposed to be the person on the ticket, right? Yeah. And the reality is there are dozens and dozens and dozens of people backstage running the cues, having built that show, and even more outside of that. So David, I know you've also done a lot of different types of jobs, but kind of speaking to that on-site physical show day element, a lot of times it's more than just one show day also, right? These shows are being built with longevity to replicate, to load in, to load out. David, can you speak a little bit to how you kind of embrace those productions and then actually get them from concept out on the road?
Sure. I tell people that touring to me is like a big puzzle. You have all of these different pieces and they all have to fit together in order to work. So that's light, sound, video, audio, catering, trucking, buses, charter jets, and all of that starts with putting together a budget before it even leaves the door. So how I've usually worked, there's been some tours where I've started building out budgets a year out in advance because we know that it's going to change. And there's some that I've been called on to kind of clean up, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks out. But I always tell people, if you spend a little bit more up front, it's going to pay for itself on the back end, because then you're not going to have, this shady type of vendor who you've never worked with before that doesn't have the backup in case a lighting fixture goes down or a bus breaks down or a truck breaks down. So my world starts way in advance, usually on average 3 months to a year out, depending on the size and scope of the tour. So it's very, very different to deal with all the different personalities. The artist wants to see one thing visually. The designer wants to see something else visually. The management wants to see that vision, but they don't want to pay for it. And then you have business managers sit in that just want to see the bottom dollar. Well, why are we paying for that? There's just so many things that you kind of have to navigate in order to get to the point of where, okay, we now have a budget. We now have our vendors. We now have our crew and staff. Okay, now let's put it all together and move it from city to city, state to state, and a lot of times from country to country. So it can, depending on the size and scope, it could be a monster.
And the budget has come up a few times with all of you, but David, you also have spent some time working as that tour accountant, and I'm wondering if you could kind of help us transition into understanding, when we talk about that budget, what are some things and hurdles that end up impacting what that looks like? You mentioned different vendors. There are some visual pieces. I think it depends to what the designer comes. What are some things that impact the way your budget ends up looking as it evolves?
Size and scope of the tour, for one, how many trucks and buses that we're going to need. And that will entail how many staff that we're going to need to move it from city to city. The staging that's going to be involved. Do we need a 60 by 40 stage? Are we playing stadiums where we're going to need to bring in a mobile stage or a stage that we're going to travel with? Does the stage need to be static, or does the stage need to be a rolling stage? There's so many different things. It's kind of like a myriad of things that can drop through that people can miss. But if you have a great designer, if you have a great tour manager, a great production manager, a great accountant, and in my world, if you have strong management and strong business management, it makes life a little bit easier because all of these people have done it before and they understand all the parameters to make a great show. When you have a weak link and part of that chain is where things can go off the rails or go completely pear-shaped, as we say. But I think that a great designer, great management, an artist who has a vision also. I've had a great opportunities to work with a lot of people who can do pen to paper. Here's what I want to see, and then have it can bring it to Bing or bring it to Sooner and go, here's my vision, and these two, Bing and Sooner, can go, oh, I totally understand what you're going to say, and then they can have in-depth conversations with them to make that a reality, which makes my job a lot easier.
Was navigating those conversations and then helping it get to kind of the final version it's supposed to be. To help offer some context in case people don't know, what would you say is the average crew size that you typically go out with, and maybe a few of the clients you've worked with in that context?
It could be anywhere from like a small theater tour where you have like maybe 30, 40 people to a stadium tour where you have well over 200, 300 at a time. And some of the people that I've worked with have been Prince. I've worked with him for many, many, many years. Tyler, the Creator, I've done Alicia Keys, John Legend, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, Evanescence, one of my all-time favorite bands. I'm a rock guy at heart, so anytime I have a chance to work with the rock band, I'm all over it. So
Yeah.
So as this is growing together and you're kind of all needing to communicate and connect with each other, what are some markers for success? What are some things that really help to move that project along in an ideal situation?
For me, like, I would love to see more interaction with business management. Honestly, like, that is like a piece that I never get to talk to, right? I never get to talk to the business manager, and unless I'm like sending them an invoice for my work. But it just
What
feels.
would be so crucial about speaking with a business manager earlier on?
I mean, I think first off, it would be great for them to understand a little bit more about what goes on in that process, the creative process, and taking it onto the road. And I know that they definitely are involved in the conversations that Dave has with like trucks and buses and crew people, and all the spreadsheets that have all the line items of everything that goes on onto the tour. But I think sometimes what happens is like, it's like, okay, they just did a cool drawing and they're just going to make that happen. And the amount of steps that go on between like an artist sketching something or them saying, I want a gigantic bunny rabbit to pop out of my stage and then a halo to come out over top of it. Like the amount of steps that go from that conversation to reality are insane. And design is not just, I'm just going to draw something and pass it in. It's so many steps, like tons of 3D programs that we spend a ton of money on every year to keep, trained on and also to keep on our laptops. I cannot tell you how many conference calls I'm on during a week. Like it is.
How much progression is there from like the initial concept to something that everybody signs off on that also gets approval on the budget from the business manager? Because all that ties into the same sort of end budget as well. How many different iterations typically do you end up seeing?
For me, it's usually just at the most 2. I don't know of other people's processes, but usually it's just 2. Usually we're pretty close.
Does most of that work happen before kind of the drawing comes together then?
Yeah, well, I mean, my personal process is to try to get in as much information, like production information as possible, so that it goes into the initial pitch. So when we actually draw our renders and our creative pitch, we can almost take those renders and spit out technical plots within like 5 days or less.
So is it an asset for you as a designer, having had some of that experience being on the road and physically doing it? Do you think some of that design ends up being more realistic?
Potentially. I also have a really badass team of nerds that I work with all the time that are really great at going like, hey, that's not going to work. My husband's also a staging account rep at Gallagher. So if I show him something, he's like, that's like 5 trucks, not 2. Right. So I can lean on people. I mean, honestly, like it's a collaboration. you can't do it by yourself, right? Like it's a collaboration. You've got to lean on people. I ask people questions all the time. I'm independent. It doesn't matter how old they are. I have two 22-year-olds that are way younger than me that are so smart, and I learn from them every day. Like you just got to learn and collaborate, you know?
Bing, I'm curious. It sounds like in the context of how Sooner is talking, I keep thinking of your idea of being a reality chaperone. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit. Your role ends up playing sort of that middle ground between all of these departments a lot. It's a challenging space to be. Can you speak to the realities of being the reality chaperone?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the amazing things that is universal between David and Sooner myself is that idea that you're a reality chaperone, and we all just do it from very different perspectives, right? And sometimes at very different times. So for me, the reality chaperone is it's external as well as internal. Stating from the beginning for the internal teams that I'm big on yes, we're going to work hard, but yes, we're going to have a good time while we do this. And the vibes and energy, like they have to be positive. And I tell anyone all the time, we are not saving lives. We are not creating some new rocket fuel. We are doing our jobs, and we are going to do them well, and we're going to be successful. But we can have fun while we do this, and that means like from an interpersonal standpoint, that means our vendors, the whole shebang. The reality chaperone part comes into the realism of, hey, I have X amount of money and I want to go to the moon. And you don't have money to go to the moon. So let's bring that down to let's go to another state. um, and that's just part of the process. And like I said, that happens from a client perspective, but that also happens, from a stage down from that in terms of our vendors and our partners. And I tell a lot of the people who work under me, working with a vendor is it's about a relationship, but it's also about you know using the right tool that you need in your toolbox. If I need a hammer, I don't use a Phillips screwdriver. If I need a saw, I don't use. It's just you have to really have a good sense of like who are the people on your team. Your vendors are crucial to your success. Your team is crucial to your success. As Suna just mentioned, I work with, well, everyone under me is younger than me. And I am blessed to still be in a position where I can still learn. I can still pay attention. I don't think I know everything. As a matter of fact, I'm blessed to know that I don't know everything. And they put me in a position where they let me lead and they trust me. They trust to follow me. And that's also a version of reality chaperoning, just to really like have your team believe in your vision and your ability to do what you do, and then allow them to do what they do. And I think that's always led to success in my capacity.
For someone who wants to be a producer, what types of skill sets are important to have, or what types of things make you particularly good at this role?
I don't know if I'm particularly good, but people keep telling me I am. I think personality and temperament play a big part in it. I stress and people think it's really cliche and simple, but like be a good person and be good to people. And that's part of the game. But part of it is like, it's networking, it's relationships, it's respect for what people bring to the table, it's respect for people what they don't know, and it's respect for people for what they do know. And um, part of my journey has been that I've been very blessed to be in a position where I came out of the music industry. I was a studio engineer for 2 years, so audio was like my thing. Like I was good at. And then that moved into lighting, and then that moved into scenic fabrication, and then that moved into logistics and trucking and doing a truck pack, which I did for the years ago for the first time. And I was like, I don't think I know what I'm doing, but it seems to be working. So as many things as you can be involved in, or at least have access to pay attention to, doesn't mean you have to be a master at it. I'm not a master at any of this. I'm very focused. I try to be as organized as possible, and just put myself in a position where when I don't know something, I am more than happy to raise my hand and say I don't know. And if I have the right team and people who care about the work that they do, somebody will know. And if we all don't know, then somebody will figure it out.
I like that attitude. I mean, I think it's a good approach. When I think about the teams that work backstage, one of the things I love the most is that exact attitude. I believe that with this group of minds, anything is figure outable and anything can be solved. But that space to ask questions and to learn, or to come into an area where you're not as knowledgeable, you're not as experienced, that can be really intimidating. I think it's almost easier for people with a little more experience under their belt to say that kind of thing sometimes. So, David, I'm curious, as you see kind of younger, we've had a few questions about entering the industry as a roadie and as you're getting started. What are some things people might be able to do as they're starting out their careers, or suggestions you might make? You work with a lot of young students as they hope to line themselves up for success as they might enter this part of the industry.
I would say do your research. I mean, like when I was coming up, we didn't have the advent of Google where you could find anyone or figure out stuff. I would find out locally, um, like a local promoter or theater company or a booker, or work as a runner for like Live Nation or AEG or the local promoter. Any place that you can place yourself in a situation where you can observe, learn, and listen. I think those are great things. I also teach a lot of college classes, and I get this question quite a bit. And the other thing is read everything that you can get your hands on. And I mean,
Mhm.
you have Google, you've got access to a library, you've got books, knowledge, wisdom. And my big thing that I had learned coming up is to find a mentor or two or three. Because what I tell a lot of my students, if you don't ask, you don't know. And there's no question that's a stupid question. I mean, I'm 61 years old and I still ask questions. And some of the stuff, I mean, I didn't even have anything social media wise until I started teaching college students. And they were like, Mr. Norman, you need to get on Instagram. I'm like, what's Instagram? And now I'm on Instagram. It's the first thing I look at in the mornings, first thing I look at before I go to bed. So it's always, like Bing
It's
says,
fun
it's
on
always
Instagram.
a learning process to learn stuff. But I think that my three mentors taught me is a lot of times if you just listen and observe something, you can learn a lot more than actually blah, 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 talking. Because sometimes you talk out of turn. And the other thing I would say is learn to read a room. You don't want to kind of just jump into someone's conversations when they're like very having a very intense conversation. So I would say learn locally, see what you can find locally, find a mentor, which would be great, and take those college classes that are prudent to what you really want to do. And if there's someone that you want to be like a tour manager, a production manager, find those people, reach out, email them, say, hey, can I pick your brain for 5 or 10 minutes? Because a lot of times they'll say, sure, I would love to kind of teach a younger person. And if they say no, don't take it personally. Those people are quite busy. I'm like, I'll text or email Sooner from time to time just to, hey, I have this quick question. What do you think? And Sooner's like, boom, like less than 5 minutes later,
Otherwise,
an
there's
answer.
200 emails in my box. So
Well, we have to
Right.
keep asking each other and learning from each other. Although I think it's
Yep.
also fair to note those people just starting, especially if you're looking to get into that technical space, it might not be to the scale of this, but getting started in local
Hmm.
school, community, church type events is
vendors,
a great way to kind of get
Yep.
started. Sorry, what was
Hmm.
that, Sooner?
vendors need help. There's
Yep.
vendors all across the country, local and regional, and nationwide. I mean, they all need help. I send interns to them constantly. So
What types of things might that experience offer for someone who's just getting started? What's so beneficial about sending people to try it?
yeah, I mean, I think as if you're going to go on the road, I think it's important to know your tools, right? Like if you're going to go learn to be a lighting operator, you really need to understand what lights you're operating. And the best way to do that is by going to a vendor and learning how to tech them, how to plug them in, how to address them, how to program them. There's so many things. I mean, honestly, like learning which lane you want to be in too. If you want to be backstage as a touring personnel, audio is very, 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 very different from lighting. And they're all very different from video, which is different from stage carpentry and backline and wardrobe and production management. Like they're all different roles. So you want to find out if you're more of a creative person and you want to deal with, lighting and video, then you want to go to a vendor that does that stuff. if you really are into audio and mixing for monitors for an artist, or like mixing PA for the audience, like you want to go into that world, right? Check out Claire, right? So finding what lane you want to go in is really, really important.
Well, and there's kind of different specialties in each, which I think is a great thing to note sooner. Someone was asking about video on the chat, but even within video, you need your technicians who manufacture, create, and make the LED screens work. But you also need your content teams to be able to produce what goes onto those screens and program those to make that work.
And now and it gets even crazier. Like, do you want to be a video director where you're in charge of cutting cameras? Do you want to be like, normally the people that are on the road actually flying the LED screens are also the camera operators during the show. So like there's that lane. Then there's also the server operator, who's the person that's actually putting the content on the screens. And that is there's a bunch of different programs right there that like you would need to know. So like even within the departments, there's a lot of different, lighting has lighting techs, lighting operators, lighting programmers, right? Like they're all different roles. And sometimes depending on the tour, they can be the same role, but a lot of times they're different on like the arena stadium runs.
Mm-hmm. Kind of reaching already the end of our time, which is crazy. We have a lot of great questions in the chat. We'll also try to kind of answer some that we don't get to live as well. But we talked a lot about budget. There is a question for someone who might be thinking about their budgets for the first time. What are things to consider? How does one need to start thinking about the resources that they need to make sure that they're budgeting correctly for a big production? Suggestions on how to get started for some.
I'm not.
That's a big question. Ooh, David's ready.
I love budgets. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love. God, that question is just so open-ended. It just depends on the size and scope of the tour. Is a big thing. It depends on the artist's vision, and the routing is probably the second most important thing of
What
putting
do you
Oh,
mean
it
by
all together.
routing?
I'm sorry. So moving from city to city. So let's just say you're playing Iowa City. Then next city is going to be like St. Louis, then Nashville. Are you able to make those kind of drives? Luckily, those are all pretty short drives, except for like going from Nashville to Iowa City. That's like almost 10-hour drive. But the other things to consider is how, labor, stagehands locally. Are you going to be able to load in 10 or 50 trucks into this particular venue? How are you going to move all of these people? How many buses? How many staff you're going to need? How many trucks you're going to need? Catering is a number which a lot of people don't really address anymore in their budgets, because they'll just put in a number. We think that this is going to cover it, but as your numbers grow, as the production grows, those numbers are going to grow, and people don't ever come back and address that. And one of the things that I found coming out of the pandemic is a lot of people didn't figure out that things were going to be a lot more expensive coming out of the pandemic. Fuel was up 28% than it was post-pandemic. And my last large tour, we had 17 trucks and 12 buses. And what we had budgeted and what we finished up ending with, fuel just killed us at the end. Catering was a lot more. And then we also found coming out of the pandemic that people had pivoted to other jobs. Like we were out of truck drivers and bus drivers, because all of those truck drivers and bus drivers ended up going to work for Walmart or Amazon. They couldn't, people had to support their families during those 2 years. So I would say catering, the routing, size and scope of the tour, personnel.
That's a lot of big stuff, right? And stuff that not everyone considers. Like the idea that gas is involved, like being able to think through those details feels really important.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I just want to say, I don't love budgets, but I do like spending other people's money.
I second that. I don't know where you are. I can't point to you properly.
I know sooner.
At least I get in there somehow, like I get in the realm.
But what I said earlier is you pay a little bit more up front and it pays for itself on the back end.
Exactly.
Look at the production of that news show and the Coldplay show.
There we go. Sooner, there is a question on if the design falls to production or to the artist's creation. And it sounds like that kind of is talking a little bit to where you're at, right? Where it's a little bit of both. It looks like a little bit of budget, a little bit of creative. Do you have a quick answer to kind of wrap that up for us and how your space sits?
For set design and specifically set design? Yeah. Okay. Is that the one I'm looking at here? What areas? Okay, cool. So it's funny because when I started in the industry 23 years ago, the lighting designer was basically in charge of all the visual aspects of the show. So I was called the lighting designer, but I was also kind of designing the set and also designing the video and everything. So in the end, I guess I was kind of the production designer, but just called the lighting designer. It's since changed into different roles. You can do shows where, I'll basically be the production designer and do everything, set, video, lighting, right? Like I was saying earlier, I even have choreographers that I work with and costumers. Or I can just do set, or I can just do lighting. So in the end, when you go to a show, the best productions are when everything is cohesive. So the set design is usually something that you're working with all the other team members to make sure that, honestly, it usually comes from set design first, and then you build the rest of the stuff on top of it. So typically when an artist has an idea or a vision, they're saying, like, if the simplest thing is like, I want my drummer to be on a riser that's this tall center stage. Like that can be the simplest form of set design. But then you can also have an artist that says, like I said earlier, I want a giant bunny to inflate on stage with a halo that comes down over it. Like when they say these things, you're then reacting to, the lighting design and the video that goes around that stuff to make a cohesive look. But honestly, the set design comes directly from either a creative director that is working with the artist or what the artist wants to see on stage with them. And then we just collaborate to make it into reality and put our spin on it. And then TAIT builds it.
Clever. Well, thank you so much for that quick answer, Sooner.
Yeah.
I know we are really low on time. Kind of quick one sentence wrap up. What is one thing that you think people should leave here knowing about production? Bing.
Relationships are everything and will take you so far if you maintain good, respectful relationships with the people that you work with.
I think that applies no matter what role you're seeking. David?
Everything that Bing said, be respectful of people's time also.
Sooner?
Well, I'm actually typing this answer out right now. Kindness goes a long way, guys. Kindness and networking and doing things with a smile, even though you just want to stop doing what you're doing.
People remember the kind folks. This is an industry where we have to put a lot of time in, and it has to be an enjoyable experience to spend that much time with each other. So the people perspective is huge.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. I know for me, it is the community of people we get to work with, especially in that backstage realm where we all get to kind of live and exist. It is some of the most intelligent, creative, kindest, most, quick on their feet thinkers that you're going to meet. And I know it's kind of inspiring to even hear you guys talk about this because it is you and the people like you in your roles getting this stuff done and making these shows real. So thank you guys so much for your time and for joining us on this panel. Thank you everybody for listening in. We really appreciate the time to talk about what goes into production. No matter where your roles take you and where you end up, we hope you carry some of this with you.